Good morning. I am Helen D. Kaiser, Chair of the League of Women Voters of Weston. And on behalf of the League, I want to welcome everyone to the first of 3 consecutive Saturdays of candidate events this month. The League is a nonpartisan organization of women and men who believe in informed voter is essential to our democracy and has been involved in helping inform voters since its inception 100 years ago last year. We never support any political party or party candidate. To learn more about the League, to view our voters guide, which will help inform voters about the candidates running in this year's election, see our website. The voters guide will be available a little bit later this month, mid-month, and you can view there the registration area for the additional debates and contribute questions to future debates or forums. We're going to be offering both. To learn more about the League programs in general, also visit that website. It is lwwestonct.org. I want to thank everyone who's been involved in preparing for today's event, and especially our moderator, Kay Maxwell, and our candidates. We are fortunate to have Kay as our moderator today. She is a past president of both the League of Women Voters of Connecticut and the National League, and is very experienced in debates and running them fairly. So, Kay, take it away.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Helen. And welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning as we, as Helen said, attempt something that is a bit unique in our history of doing debates since we are all on Zoom. So we appreciate your joining us on a device of your choosing. These debates are also being recorded and they will be available on the Weston League website, as Helen mentioned. Now, our purpose today is to provide you with an opportunity to hear the candidates' views on the issues facing Weston. The first debate will be between the 2 candidates for first selectman, and the second debate will be between the 2 candidates for selectman. The format is designed to allow the candidates time to discuss the issues. The only rule is that the total time used by each candidate by the end of the debate be approximately the same. I will be posing the questions this morning, but the questions themselves have come from the public in advance of the debate. The candidates are not restricted to 1 or 2 minute responses. Instead, they can spend as little or as much time as they feel is appropriate to discuss each issue. Our goal is to encourage debate. The candidates will take turns being the first to respond to a question, and following the question period, each candidate will make a 2-minute closing statement. The order of responding to questions and of closing statements was decided by lot prior to the debate. Members of the League of Women Voters are serving as timers, and they will keep the candidates and me informed of the time expended. If a serious imbalance in time occurs during the course of the debate, I will call it to their attention and see that it is corrected. It's now my pleasure to introduce the candidates for first selectman. Republican Kirby Brenzel and Democrat Samantha Nestor. And now to the debate. And the first candidate to respond will be Ms. Nestor. And the question is, how do you view the current relationship among local towns, regional agencies, and state government in Connecticut? What changes, if any, would you support?
Thank you so much, Kay. Thank you for being our moderator. Thank you for the League of Women Voters for having us here, and thank you for all of those folks who've tuned in. I would like to say that our region has a fantastic organization called WestCog, where all of the town first selectmen and women gather and they talk about how to work together. Party affiliation does not matter. And it is a problem-solving group. I've been fortunate enough to work with this group. We've worked on topics such as public safety, regionalization of services. We've talked about hazardous waste disposal. We've been able to join separately different organizations that help our town run more efficiently. Our state representatives as well, we have fantastic relationships with them, be it our state representative, Ann Hughes, and our two senators of different parties, Tony Wang and Will Haskell. We also have been fortunate enough to have Governor Lamont and Susan Bisowitz come to our town. And Fairfield County does have a watchful eye on what happens in Hartford. I think what we want to make sure is that we maintain local control of what we want to keep here in Weston. But I think it's also important that we participate and maintain fantastic relationships with those surrounding towns. I'm especially proud of the relationship we have with Westport, Easton, and Reading as we try to combat the Delta variant and COVID in general.
Mr. Brinsell, same question.
Yeah, so first of all, definitely thank you to the League of Women Voters for having us here today. Really appreciate the chance to share a little bit about our messages. Thank you, Kay, to moderating, and virtual handshake, Sam, and good luck to you two here today. As far as the question, I mean, fairly similar, I think, as far as Sam, in terms of our relationship with our sister cities. So whether it's Westport or Wilton or Easton, I think we do a nice job about sharing and trying to work together on a lot of the issues in which we face, which is great. That's awesome. It's very awesome to have that kind of collaboratory nature. I would disagree though, just a little bit in terms of like the larger or the state level. Although, you know, I love working with Tony. He does a great job. In fact, I'm doing some things with him tomorrow. I think on the D side, I do see some concerns in terms of how we relate back to how we're working with the state. Some of the moves towards regionalization, and most specifically, I'm talking about keeping zoning local, which I am a huge proponent of. I believe in keeping zoning local. I want us here in Weston to be able to make our own decisions, whether it's relating to zoning or the schools. I'm not sure have been as conducive as they could have been over the past couple months.
Can I respond for a
You
second?
may. Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. I agree that we should keep zoning local. And I think it's sort of a misnomer because we have a very strong planning and zoning board. So strong, in fact, that I know that our chair worked very closely with Senator Will Haskell on the recent legislation that was passed regarding affordable housing, regarding accessory dwelling units. All of those items were done sort of in conversation. And in fact, no limits have been placed on our town that would force us not to have our zoning laws be governed by our fantastic planning and zoning team. So I do disagree a little bit with that because Will Haskell's been a very willing partner and a good listener.
Anything else, Mr.?
Yeah, I mean, that's not surprising. I can see where Sam's coming from. However, on the other side, coming from the R perspective, I haven't necessarily seen the folks from the D side or from the Democratic side be as vocal in terms of what I've really heard about standing up and really kind of saying, you know, yes, you know, this is how it is today, but how will it be in the future? How will we have relating to local zoning if some of the changes that have already been made continue to go? We've seen some of the movements and some of the indicators and some of the messages that our larger state representative and others have shared about where they would like to go relating to local zoning. And frankly, I'm not necessarily sure that it's conducive to what our voters here in Weston are most interested in. From what I've heard based on our discussions, we want to ensure that we keep zoning local. We want to ensure that we keep local control of our schools. And if they're working together, that's great. But I think that we still want to make sure that we're very open and very, you know, solid in terms of saying that that's what's important to us.
Anything else?
Yeah, I just think there's a difference between what people hear and the actual governing. That's all I have to say.
Anything else on that question then? All right, if not,
Just
then,
say that making sure that
go ahead.
what people hear, put it out there. Make sure you're out in front. You know, make sure that we're saying, you know, and I'll be the first to say it. I am for keeping zoning local. If I have to sign something or preach it from the mountaintop, that's what I'm all about. And I am not afraid to say that and kind of put it out there. That's where I lie. I'm not beholden to anyone in Hartford. You know, my party is one that has stood up for these issues and will continue to do so. And that's kind of my strong close on this.
Ready for the next question then?
I certainly am.
Okay. All right, and this time the first to response is Mr. Frenzel. And the question is, excuse me, a sizable number of people appear to have felt underserved by town officials during the pandemic, especially if they were uncomfortable with social media or did not know how to sign up for Everbridge. As first selectman, how important do you think it is to reach out to the Weston community in a crisis situation, and how might it be improved?
Yeah, so I mean, this is one I think Sam and I will probably be very close on. I think COVID and I think the handling and making sure that you were doing the right things around COVID is extremely important. I mean, that's probably one of the largest issues that's facing us here today. In terms of how I kind of look at life and at how I look at roles along these lines, I really have kind of three legs to the stool in terms of what we do and in terms of what I work on. One is around integration. So I like being out there and working with others, being part of a bipartisan group to kind of work to address things. The other is impact. So making sure that the things that we're working on make a difference, that we're doing things that have a difference for our community. But the last one is engagement. And so if we are hearing that there are some who are not getting that connection, whether for whatever reason, because they can't engage on social media or other things, we want to make sure that we engage, that we share with them, that we let them know what's going on. So if we need to think of new and different ways to kind of ensure that we're doing that, I think that's huge and that's important. So, you know, if it's something other than social media, there's definitely other tools and ways in which we could do that and share and kind of communicate within our local community. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Sam. I'm sure she has some very complimentary things to say on this as well.
Kirby and I both agree that you have to be able to reach people where they are. And I'm going to say that communications is actually my wheelhouse. It's the place where I'm most comfortable. It is what my business, my private business does. I will say that we have to find ways to connect with individuals in this community other than digitally, which is why I have initiated our newsletter that does go out. It is printed. It goes out every single week. I keep trying to make it shorter, but for some reason it's always 5 pages of things going on, a true testament to our town hall employees. We are also trying to engage people physically again. Having these outdoor community programs that are nonpartisan, that are working with our different committees and associations, that bring people together outside in a safe, COVID-safe way, because some people respond to emails, other people respond to paper, other people respond to actually seeing each other. I think we're trying to reach out in multiple different channels just to have people connected again. We have had 18 months of isolation. And I believe that the way to move forward with Weston is to find people where they are and connect with them, be it in person, be it by mail, be it by email. We do put things up on social media. I have my own feelings about that. But again, there are people who are reading social media, so we have to find them where they are. We have 513 new families who have moved to town, well, households who have moved to town, many of them with small families who are not getting communications from the schools yet. So it's very important, not just for the people who have lived here 10, 20, 30 years, but for the people who have lived here 2 years to 2 days, that we find ways to access them and let them be part of the community.
Anything else on that question?
Yep, I mean, just to kind of relate it back to kind of I think the impetus for the question, I mean, and Sam totally probably agrees with me on this. COVID is a safety issue. So COVID is something that relates directly back to like making sure that we ensure the health and wellness of all of our residents of Weston. So if it isn't social media, we need to find and make sure that we're doing whatever else we can to communicate with our people appropriately. And I'm just holding this up. I know we all have phones. It's something even the folks who don't have social media probably still have at this point. There's definitely incidences where we can send out communications if they're an emergency response along those lines. I know we've gotten them before. So if something comes up along those lines, I know Sam would do it. I know I would do it. We'd make sure that we get the word out on something like this so that people stay safe.
We have integrated a new emergency system, and we were able to see how well it was working during the past 2 storms when I first came on board. We had Hurricane Henry, and we also had Tropical Storm Ida. Thank goodness Hurricane Sam never came. But we did utilize these emergency alerts for the first time since we integrated to the new system, and they did work quite well, and we were able to sign up a significant number of people because again, you got text messages, I apologize for the computerized voice, phone calls to people's home lines. So when there is an emergency, we are Town Hall has done an excellent job, and our emergency group has done an amazing job, and especially our neighborhood captains, who during those times actually do sign people up for these alerts.
Anything else?
I mean, the last thing just to close on this, I am sure that Sam was very proud and happy that Hurricane Sam did not strike our region. As I am that there's no Hurricane Kirby, although I do bring a lot of force, but that's not one of the things that I want a negative connotation with.
All right, next question. And Ms. Nestor, you're the first to respond. Pardon me. Zoom has been critical to informing Weston residents about how their government works, including for those who cannot get out in the evening to attend board and commission meetings. As selectmen, will you continue to provide town Zoom service or its equivalent in the future? And if elected, would you institute a policy directing all boards and commissions to automatically post every Zoom replay of their meetings on the town website?
That is a great question. And it is a question that I have been thinking about when the emergency order ends. Because one thing about the Zoom meetings is the Zoom meetings have had a huge effect on voter engagement. And it has allowed voters who may have had to have a babysitter if they wanted to go to town hall for a meeting, or if they were coming in from the train, commuting, they can turn it on their phone. We've always, for the Board of Selectmen, we've always recorded our meetings. So there has historically been a way to watch a meeting that you missed. I do want to say, as someone who runs a meeting, I do miss, even right here, the physical interchange that you have with an audience, with a group. But while the Delta variant is still here, and if whatever next comes there, really the safest way for us to gather as a community, if not outside, is by Zoom. There are other municipalities that are doing a hybrid version, where they are doing the town meetings just with the different boards, and the visitors are Zooming in. That is a bit complicated and sometimes is expensive, but that is something that I'm willing to explore. I just don't know what the costs involved are and the logistics. We currently do have, because it is, I believe, the policy that if something is a meeting is being recorded, being on Zoom, it is recorded. And you can look at our Vimeo site, and you can watch, you could get your fill of whatever meetings you might have missed. Some of them are audio recordings, but all of the boards that are extensions of the Board of Selectmen, they do have recorded minutes because of COVID. And we do announce that they are recorded, but I would very much like to do a hybrid version. You know, that would be my desire, if it would be possible, like they do in Darien.
Mr. Brentel?
Yeah, I'm fully supportive of that as well. I think that, you know, we have to adapt and change in terms of the way we communicate and engage with all of our voters and our neighbors here in Weston. I mean, I think this is extremely important. And I think, things that were, not necessarily the same case a couple of years ago are table stakes in terms of how they need to be so now. I've been very fortunate in not only my job where I focus on environmental social governance. And so that governance piece has a huge part around disclosure, around making sure that you're open and disclosing and reporting on the information that you do relating to your role in terms of work, as well as I've been on several boards and commissions here in town. So just thinking of two of them, so thinking about like the Sustainable Weston Commission or thinking about Weston Parks and Recreation Center, our commission, we both record and share the information on that. And so like, I'll just put this out there, testing me in terms of how I think about disclosure and how we think about what we want to share and go back through on these meetings. I mean, you can take a look, as I've served as the secretary for Weston Parks and Rec for multiple years. Check my notes, check what we're sharing and check what we're disclosing against what people want to read and kind of go back and look at. And look at how, even I think I was in charge of the last Sustainable Weston Commission meeting. We recorded it, we had it on Zoom, we made sure that it was posted. We made sure that all those things are out there so that all of our neighbors and fellow Westonites can hear about all the great things we're working on, the challenges we're having, so things in which they can get involved, as well as what we can do better on.
Anything else on that question? All right, the next question, Mr. Brenzel, you'll be first to respond. Weston will soon be retiring its major long-term debt. Going forward, what is most important to you? Possibilities might include facilities optimization of the schools, keeping taxes down, continuing to preserve the environment and protect water, and I'm sure others.
Well, you hit a couple of my high ones. I mean, I am a huge proponent of protecting the environment. I've been on the board of the Aspetuck Land Trust for several years, where our work with the Green Corridor has been instrumental in making sure that we preserve this wonderful environment that I've grown to love here in Connecticut. But in terms of thinking about this, in terms of like what I'm hearing from our constituents and folks who are our neighbors here in Weston, I mean, I think probably the number one thing is keeping our taxes and our mill rate down. And so thinking about that and thinking about debt and thinking about other solutions and what we do to ensure that we maintain fiscal responsibility within our local government, I mean, that's something that I have held near and dear to my heart. And I've really worked to make sure that we have impact around here in Weston. And so like, just to bring this up as an example, I was hugely proud to work on a bipartisan group together with Chris Spalding, Jonathan Louise, and Chella to bring forth our first two remote net metered solar opportunities for Weston, which is great. I mean, they provide green energy. They make sure that we're doing things that are sustainable here for our town in terms of how we look at the grid. But the other thing that's awesome about them is that they're innovative in terms of how they look at ways to control costs for our town and for here at Weston. So it's more of like a triple bottom line approach. So thinking about things like people, thinking about, how we are helping our folks here in Weston, thinking about planet, how are we thinking about things that are green, but that last piece. So thinking about making sure from a profitability standpoint that we've kept the costs and our utility rates down. And this project is going to save millions of dollars for our town over the lifespan of the project, as well as thousands of dollars a year. And those dollars that are saved directly reflect in lower taxes and lower mill rates. These are things that are important to us. So that would be kind of the main focus in terms of where I would go with that question, Kay.
Ms. Nestor?
So I first want to say that we have the opportunity to also further pay down our debt because of the Aspetuck Land Trust purchase of the Fromson Strassler property. I am a big proponent of gathering all the data and getting all the information. I think we have big issues, big problems, big opportunities coming our way. We have a crumbling infrastructure, be it in our schools, be it in our town buildings, be it on our roads. We have a fantastic mechanism for getting grants in this town that during my tenure, we've gotten $14 million worth of grants that have been able to be used for these infrastructure needs. And I was on the board during the virtual net metering programs. So yes, creative ways of bringing down the debt, but bringing down the mill rate and taxes, but also starting from zero every time we do the budgets. That's what we do. We do zero budgeting every time we start the budgets. And we look at things like services. We look at things like capital needs, and we have a very close eye on things. We've been very fortunate this year with so many home sales and initiating our tax sale that we collected 104% or 103% tax collection rate. This was a one-off, but it did allow us to be able to increase our grand list, and we will be able to see the fruits of that labor next year when we are collecting our taxes and when we are doing our budget. I do think we have to keep in mind keeping the mill rate down. That's why when I was in office, and I'm still in office, we actually borrowed from the general fund, and the Board of Finance had a flat mill rate during COVID because they were concerned about how that would affect the town. And over the course of the past 2 years, our mill rate has only gone up 0.55%. So we've been very cognizant of that. But I also want to say, of course, we want to keep taxes down. Of course, we want to control the mill rate. And of course, we want to make sure we are still providing the services and maintaining and improving the infrastructure in town. And I have the contacts, and our team knows how to get that job done.
Anything else, Mr. Frenzel?
Yeah, I mean, I just put this out there that in terms of making impact, in terms of like actually leading for some of these changes and doing it, I mean, my track record is pretty solid in terms of what I've been able to bring to the town on that. So from a cost savings perspective, I'm not sure that we've had anything that much better than working on the remote net solar deal over the last couple of years. And I look forward to bringing additional innovative things like that to the town to make sure that we can continue to make a difference on these things for our fellow Westonites and neighbors.
Anything else on that question?
Let's move on.
All right. Ms. Nestor, you're the first to respond to this question. Do you think a police civilian review board is necessary in the town of Weston?
I appreciate that question because I think there's a lot of information or misinformation that's flying around. As everyone knows, mostly in town, our town has had some missteps in how we handle civilian complaints. And I think that if we say that we didn't, I think that is ignoring a huge portion of our community. I think that our police commission, our citizens, our residents all deserve respect. And I think that we all should be interacting respectfully. I have initiated during my tenure as first select woman a research project with the Connecticut Council of Municipalities. I have asked them to look into different towns that are similar to our own, what they do to handle civilian complaints. Is it a civilian review board? Is it a police commission? Is it both? I think that we are as a community in different camps, that it's either or. So with the consultation with the chair of the police commission and talking to certain other members of the police commission, we will be holding, when I get that research, we will be holding a workshop within the community, within the Board of Selectmen. And we will be talking and learning about best practices on how to handle civilian complaints. While Dr. Spalding was on the Board of Selectmen and he was the first selectman, we did get a copy of an ordinance. I do believe rushing through that ordinance before we have a chance to communicate freely and learn more. I'm a data person. I am all about educating myself and educating the community. And I believe that we have to come together and make decisions together on how we are going to handle civilian complaints. Right now, and previously, our civilian complaints were handled by an internal review process by the police department, the police chief or the police captain. And my gut tells me that sometimes it's not the best idea to have the police policing the police. So I am with the police, chair of the police commission, discussed this concept with her, and we will be moving forward on this. So I think the binary question of, do you believe we need to have a civilian review board is a little too yes or no. I do think the correct answer is, I think the way we handle civilian complaints can be improved. And I'm looking forward to working with my colleagues to find the best way to do that. And if it is a civilian review board, then so be it.
Mr. Brenzel?
Yeah, just first to start, I mean, I'd like to just put this out there to the Democratic and Republican parties here in Weston. I was extremely impressed, as I am a huge proponent of diversity and inclusion, that all of the candidates for selectman office come from protected diversity classes. I think that just really goes to show how important this issue is and how important we take it here within our town, which really, really, really means a lot. I think that that's huge. However, in terms of thinking about things like, should we have a citizens review board for our police? You know, the way I've been kind of looking at this is maybe similar to Miss Sam's, but maybe a little bit different. I have been kind of gauging what's going on in some of the other towns and what might work here. And so I did notice that Westport recently was not able to get a similar kind of approach passed. Theirs was, they weren't able to actually kind of get the agreement to go through. It's fine, they're looking at it. I think Sam's approach in terms of what she's taking around, like, let's make sure we take a very deliberate and data-driven approach to it is great. However, you know, for me, I'm a huge supporter of our first responders, including our police force. And I do have a lot of questions in terms of why, for a police force of 15 folks, you know, and we already have an elected police commission of 7 individuals with a Democratic majority, why would we need an additional group on top of that to oversee them? That one I'd still need to look into a lot further before I could basically, you know, go to approve something along those lines.
All right, next question, Mr. Brenzel.
I just have one thing to say.
Sorry.
So Kirby,
apologies.
you'd be all for these workshops, right? So we can all educate each other. Am I allowed to ask him a question?
You can ask away.
Okay.
Go ahead. So what do you, in terms of like having a discussion around looking at
Having
ways to-
folks who come in to tell us what their best practices are on how they manage civilian complaints.
I don't think there's anything wrong with gathering information or evidence. However, at this point
In the
right
public,
now,
in the
yeah,
public.
so I'm not, at this point right now, though, I'm not necessarily a firm proponent of supporting an additional oversight for an already elected police commission.
All right, next question, Mr. Brenzel, you're first to respond, and I would just point out you've used somewhat less time than Ms. Nestor, so if you have more to say, feel free. And the
Cutting to the
question
quick.
is, the question is, Weston has permitted accessory apartments since the late 1960s, but only within the property owner's main residence, not as a separate structure. What is your position on the state mandate to permit an accessory apartment in a separate structure on a residential lot?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a big deal. I know folks have kind of brought this up and asked questions around it. I mean, I've been pretty blunt, so I'll just continue my messaging on this. I want to protect 2-acre zoning. I mean, that's what I'm here to protect here in Weston. I think that that makes our town the idyllic town that it is, making sure that we don't have this congestion or anything else behind it. I know that this is not necessarily the same kind of deal in terms of how we would look at it and how we would consider it. And I know others have brought other things up relating to this. But for me, I'm still more about like, let's keep things the way they are. Let's make sure that we maintain 2-acre zoning. Let's maintain the way that we have things now, because that maintains our town's historic value and our town's historic look and feel.
Anything else?
Go
ahead.
So
Briefly, since
the
you're ahead of time.
so the ADU mandate can be opted out in October, opted out by our planning and zoning. It is not required. So I just want to clarify that. That is not a state mandate. You can opt out of those zoning requirements. So we can keep it local. I do want to say, in a broader sense, what the ADUs do provide is an opportunity for people who may want to age in place in Weston. What the ADUs also provide is a place for a soft landing for a recently separated family and allowing another parent to live in here. So I think looking at this in a super binary way may not be the best approach. I do like the approach that the Planning and Zoning Board is taking, and they are looking at it. And I think there is a way to have ADUs in town and still have it be the Weston way of having ADUs. But I do think in seeing how many people who want to stay in Weston, but do not want to maintain a 2-acre zone or a large house, I think there are opportunities for us to have additional housing, and ADUs may be the way to do that, to let people stay.
Ms. Brentel, anything else?
Yeah, no, I definitely see that there are points in there that we should take into consideration when we consider things like this. However, for me, looking at what the Planning and Zoning Group is doing currently and locally now, maintaining that 2-acre zoning, maintaining the things that kind of make this town great, or that it's basically built up to be from an idyllic sense, are extremely important to me. I'm sure that there are exceptions and ways we can look at it differently. That's fine. But I do always worry about the slippery slope that could come from like moves along these lines and where that might take us as a town and a community.
Well, I think for single family homes, nobody's taking away the 2-acre zoning. You can just put an ADU, and the space for the ADUs is we have over 3,000 homes here. And I think currently we have about 100 ADUs. So this is not going to overrun the town. I think we can still keep the town's flavor, but add some other housing options.
Anything else?
No,
I'm good. I think I've had my say on this one.
Okay. And again, just point out the timing difference. So next, Mr. Brenzel, Ms. Nestor, you're the first to respond. The special town meeting machine ballot vote on the sale of Fromson Strassler to Aspetuck Land Trust elicited a significant turnout. What did that large turnout, signify to you?
Okay, so just to clarify, the special town, these were separate things. I don't mean to be specific. There was a special town meeting held outside, and then there was a machine ballot vote. So could you explain to me the question? Because the special town meeting held outside was a small group,
Actually,
but there was a large turnout for the machine ballot vote.
I cannot, because this question came in. I'd happily repeat it here just to see if that helps.
I'm gonna answer about the machine ballot vote.
Well, that's what the question is focused on. It says the special town meeting machine ballot vote. So
okay,
presumably that's the focus.
So the machine ballot vote for the Aspetuck Land Trust sale is such an amazing example of bipartisan cooperation. It is an example also of communicating what the town's DNA is really about. Our town is about coming together. Our town is about open spaces. Our town is about sustainability. And this vote proved that when we have a common cause, when we have something that we're all fighting for, we get a 93% approval rate. And I would say this was bipartisan all along, not just when we did the vote, the way we managed the meetings, the way we managed the communications. And it just shows that our town has really more in common than we have differences. Our differences are clear. but when we work together, we can really hit a home run. And I will say it is one of the moments that I'm proudest of from the entire board, and how we worked with David Brandt from the Aspetuck Land Trust. We were very careful about how we proceeded and very thoughtful. And as a communications person, like, that's how you get it done. And we didn't just do it as a social media campaign. We did it with phone calls. The Aspetuck did it with phone calls, but they, again, when I said before, it's about reaching people where they are. I think that was a fine example. And it was 3 times more people than voted in our town budget. So
Okay, I'm going to stop you there just because you are ahead in time, and be certain that we can offer the opportunity for equal time to both of you. The same question, Mr. Bransell?
Yeah, and sure, and Kate, no sweat on the time. I'm totally
That's
fine with the response to that, but I appreciate you.
Want to
doing
give everybody a chance to say what they want to say.
it. I'm just very succinct. That's just how I roll. But anyways, in terms of how we think about this, I agree. I think it was awesome. I think it really, and I'll answer both parts of your question. I don't care. I kind of see where they were going with it. So 2 things. Number 1, I think it shows more about this town and our fellow Westonites and our neighbors here, and how involved and how encouraging they are of being dialed into our community. And that's great. I mean, every time I've been working at, whether it's at, Le Chat during the farmers market, or working at the Weston Historical Society during the Roaring 20s party as a bartender, that was a pretty fun gig, or doing our door-to-doors, or meeting people as we go through. People in Weston they're extremely positive, they're extremely bright, and they want to get involved. They want to do the right things. And I think that's great. I mean, I really, really, really can't see more positive folks in a local community in any place that I've ever lived, which is great. But thinking about the actual Fromson Strassler sale, and thinking about why was this an important issue, I think it goes back to one of the things that I kind of brought up initially in terms of, like, what makes you as a candidate, Kirby? Like, what kind of things do you support? What kind of things are you behind? And as a member on the board of the Aspetuck Land Trust for multiple years, and being dialed into their Green Corridor initiative, this is great. I mean, this inherently does the Fromson Strassler purchase, another of those triple bottom line focuses. So people, planet, and profit. I mean, inherently, we're protecting and adding the Fromson Strassler actually block of land into the Green Corridor to protect it in all perpetuity. The great thing for the town is that's what they were trying to do with the land anyways. So it's awesome. It really adds a lot of value and adds a lot of things that we can continue to do. That's a win-win scenario, not only for the town, not only for the Aspetuck Land Trust, and not only for, the environment, but also for Westonites. I mean, these things are amenities. They're things that our fellow neighbors can continue to enjoy and continue to love going forward in perpetuity, just like Devil's Den, just like the Aspetuck Land Trust, like Trout Brook. These are things that can add advantages and amenities for our town, which our Westonites want. That's what they're looking for. So I can't think of anything more positive to say. Love the people here in town, love Weston, love the green space. And that's really, like, it's a super duper win for all involved.
Anything else on that one? Pardon me. We just have about a minute or so before we have to move to closing statements. So let me just, a quick question. And Mr. Bransell, it's your turn to be first. And
Okay.
no need to go into detail on it, but what do you believe is the most critical challenge facing Weston today?
I'm just going to table COVID. I mean, I think both Sam and I can agree that that is a serious health and safety related issue that still faces us here, not only in Weston, but in our, larger state of Connecticut as well as the United States. Other than that, for me, and I've really been very blatant on this, want to continue to do so, it's keeping zoning local. I think that's our number one thing. I think it's something that I have consistently fought for and stood up for. I'm not sure that it's necessarily come out before from some of the folks on the other side, but I think it's extremely important to maintain that local control of what we can do here in our town of Weston and what we can do with our schools. And I'll continue to fight for that. Thanks, Kay.
Ms. Nestor, quick response here.
Obviously, public safety, whether it's COVID, whether it's storms, that's the number one thing, number one priority. And as a mom of a 9-year-old, COVID really hits home to me because my son can't be vaccinated yet. But I think that we are at a crossroads. So the most important thing to me in the town is bringing the town together to make those changes that will improve our infrastructure, improve our schools, and make everyday life better, but not shove it down someone's throat, is actually bring people along. And I think part of that is listening, taking action, and getting some results done.
Thank you both very much. The time has come for closing statements. And just as a reminder, your timers will be timing down, and they'll tell you when you have a minute left and when you have 30 seconds left and when it's time to stop. So hopefully the timers have cleared their stopwatches or their phones, as the case may be. And Ms. Nestor, you are the first with your closing statement, and you have 2 minutes.
First, I want to thank everyone who I've met along the way. I've met thousands of residents during my time on the board, and even when I was on the Board of Ed. I've been fortunate enough to serve in multiple capacities, and I understand how to get work done. I also know how to keep everyone safe. I know what it's like to be a mom and work full time and have a spouse who works and doing the juggle and try to fit a shower in there. I know how to communicate with everyone. I know that we don't have time to sit on meetings. I know we don't have time to necessarily to have that extra hour. I'm trying very hard to make everyone a part of government. I want to motivate our town hall staff. I want to motivate our team. I want to problem solve efficiently. And most of all, I want to see all of these projects that we have started together to completion. And I know that we can do it. And I know that we can make our roads smooth and our buildings new and our environment protected. So there's a lot of balls to juggle, but I actually have the experience and the skills not only to do them, but to let everyone know when they're happening and the status. So I hope you will let me continue to be your first select woman. It has been a joy and a pleasure, and I am leaving this debate with a tremendous sense of gratitude. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Brenzel, you have 2 minutes.
Great, thanks. And hey, just to put this out there, thank you, Kay. Really appreciate you doing this. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting this on. And just to put it out there even further, thank you everyone who is running for political office so far. It is a huge, huge deal, as I have come to realize and learn. I really appreciate the selfless service that everyone is putting forward, especially the Republicans, but everyone is putting forward to make sure that they can make a difference in their community, as it's a volunteer basis. But in terms of like a general overall closing statement, some of the same messages that we've talked about have come through. So what do I stand for? What's important to me? Number one, keeping zoning local. I'm not beholden to a party in Hartford. I'll stand up and be vocal for Weston and its residents and protect and maintain keeping control of our zoning and our schools local. I've talked about keeping our mill rates down and controlling costs and taxes here in Weston. I've already talked about being very proud to work with Chris and Jonathan Louise and Chella on the 2 remote net metered solar installations that we did that saved millions of dollars for our town and schools, as well as thousands of dollars a year. I mean, it's definitely one of the biggest cost saving things, and I'll continue to look for innovative ways that we can make a difference and do things along those lines. Protecting our environment, that's my other big one. Making sure that whether it's maintaining open green space, protecting our native plants, doing things like I did on the Aspetuck Land Trust to make sure that their green corridor project was good, we can do the same things here in Weston. That's what makes our town different. Adding local amenities. Like one of the big things that's rang true to me as I've talked to a lot of people at regardless of the event was they have things like what I've served on, whether it's been LaShot or the Aspetuck Land Trust or Weston Parks and Rec or Weston Historical Society or the Sustainable Weston Committee for years, I might add, that they want to see value. They want to see things in ways that we can be engaged and be part of our local community. But then just lastly, it's getting things done. So, really prioritizing the things that are important to us as Westonites and as neighbors here in our local community, making sure that we focus on things that make a difference and get them done. I know it's great that we've got a lot of things that we're working on that we're trying to push forward, but it does seem like they take a long, long, long time to get done. And that there have been problems on actually getting some of them done. And I want to make sure that in terms of like what I've been able to do on accomplishing results and getting things done, continues to make a bigger difference as I'm able to serve as first selectman. But then just lastly, I believe in us as neighbors. I believe in Weston. I know there's always good things that are going on, but there's more that we can do. And I want to ensure that I'm able to further our community and build that. And I want to be the one to lead it and help us to get there as first selectman. And thanks again, everybody.
Thank you both candidates very, very much for participating. We will now bring on our second debate for Board of Selectmen. So we will make the transition as quickly as we can, and stay tuned. All right, I see both of our candidates on my screen. You're both unmuted. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
And let me just introduce briefly. We have Amy Jenner is the Republican candidate for the board, and Martin Moabier is the Democratic candidate. Now we're going to be using the same format as we did for the first selectman debate. And so the first candidate to respond will be Mr. Moabier. And the question is, need my other sheet. As a member of the Board of Selectmen, among your responsibilities is management of town finances and setting priorities for the town. Do you think partisanship plays a role in the decisions that are made? Mr. Moabier?
Hello all. First of all, I'd like to thank the League of Women for hosting this debate and in a safe manner. Big thanks for the residents who have tuned in, maybe I should say zoomed in, and in real time, and to all who will watch this at their leisure in the near future. I really hope that being fiscally wise is not something that is done across party lines. For me, finance has been in my DNA for all of my kind of work in adult life. In fact, once upon a time, I thought I wanted to be an actuary because understanding insurance was a thing that kind of really motivated me. The reality is that at the end of the day, we are here to ensure that we can have the amenities that our town wants, but at the same time doing it in a fiscally and responsible manner. That is something that I live and breathe. It's something that I'm committed to doing. It's something that I feel that is important, and it will be done because numbers don't lie. 1 + 1 will always be 2, whether it's a Democratic answer or a Republican answer.
Ms. Jenner, same question?
Yes, hi, Kate, and ditto to everybody else. Thanks to the League of Women Voters for hosting this debate. I believe the question was, as a member of the Board of Selectmen, do you think partisanship plays a role in setting priorities and getting things done? And absolutely, partisanship has to play a role in getting things done. I think in the years that I've worked, one of the things that I discovered over time is that I don't know the answers to everything. I make it my responsibility to solicit diverse opinions, to ask a lot of questions, to make sure I hear all of the possible solutions from a whole host of people. But then I think leadership plays the next role. When you hear all of those bipartisan inputs, when you hear all the diverse thinking, the leader needs to take a stand and make things happen and stand behind what they do and be held accountable for what those decisions actually are. This is a municipality. This isn't the national government. I don't think partisanship takes a role anywhere in town government. We all want the same things. We want a town with amenities. We want a town that's has open space. That's the reason that we want a town that has great schools. That's the reason we moved to this town. So I think holding hands on any decisions and priorities and the execution of it is critically important.
Mr. Beaubier, anything to add?
I'm a bit confused because I thought that what I heard Amy says that was that partisan was important, and then in the very next breath, it's not. The reality is that we live in a small town. That's why a lot of us moved here, and the issues affect us all the same. If those roads aren't good, it affects my car the same way it affects Amy's car. And collaboration at the end of the day probably is what will get things done. One of the secret sauces, if you will, that I've been able to see as in my role of selectman currently is that we can all kind of have different opinions. But at the end of the day, it's that ability to collaborate and find the answers. And oftentimes it means not even thinking about what your party affiliation is. It's very interesting. We live in a town in which over 2,000 residents are unaffiliated. So you have to kind of govern with everyone in mind. And that's what I'm doing. That's what I've been doing. That's what my our first selectman has done. And that's why it worked so well.
So if I might respond,
You may.
Martin, actually, I didn't say that in partisanship doesn't and does play a role. I said bipartisanship is critically important in decision-making, priority setting, and execution, and that partisanship plays no role in a municipality in getting things done. So sometimes like the microphone doesn't work quite well, so I'm sure you just didn't hear me properly. I want to dig a little deeper into the issue about the roads, because the roads are a real important issue for the people in this town. And my question to the current administration is, you've had a number of years to get those roads paved. I've seen a lot of progress over the course of the last 60 days, but it's been a long time coming to get it to this place. What was the holdup in actually doing that with the infrastructure?
Okay, we need to stick with the first question and then we'll get
Okay.
to some of these others as we move along. So if either of you have anything else to say about the question of partisanship? Okay, then we'll move to the next question, and the first to respond is Ms. Jenner. And the question is, the school budget necessarily dominates town expenditures, and maintaining outstanding schools has long been a broadly supported community priority. However, in an attempt to control overall costs, some have thought that staffing of town departments such as social services and facilities that serve the wider community have been neglected. Do you think there is an imbalance that needs to be addressed? And if so, what do you propose to do about it?
So if I understand the question correctly,
And I should also add, if either of you ever need me to repeat the question, I'm always happy to do so.
it was a long question. That's why I
Yes,
want to make
it
sure I
was.
understand it. The school budget obviously dominates the town budget. It's what it does in any town that has a schools that of excellent quality like we do. I don't think that the smaller social services have necessarily been neglected. But I do think that we need to take a deeper look into each one of those areas to see what actually is being funded, what's important to continue to fund, and what we need to deprioritize. Actually, I hope I don't go off topic here because I didn't mean to do that in the last session, but it does bring me to a question that I'll ask Martin. I would have loved to have asked Sam. Sam mentioned when they were talking about the budgets that zero-based budgeting was already being done at the Board of Selectmen. I actually see no evidence of that in the budget that was put out there, and that includes social services and many of the town's other priorities. All I can see is the past year, current year, and the delta. That's true of the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen. So in order to really answer your question, Kay, in a meaningful way, I would need to look deeper into each one of those line items to understand where the investments are being made. And then I could tell you if we need to prioritize or deprioritize. Just raising the budget is not necessarily the answer.
Mr. Mobier?
It's a good question, and to some degree, I agree with a lot of Amy's points, but I want to kind of just indicate clarity, and it goes back to something that I said. 1 + 1 will always be 2. Numbers don't lie. And the thing is, Amy, is that under this administration, the previous administration, we do zero budgeting, which means, we start from zero and then we kind of build out our budgets line by line. So that's what's been done. It's in the books. I'm happy to kind of sit down with you afterwards and kind of go over kind of how this is done. But that's how it's been done. So there's no dispute in that. In terms of, I don't think that at the end of the day, this needs to be an either or kind of scenario. I think that we can address the schools and schools budgets and needs, and we can address that for the town as well. And that's what has been done. I mean, that's the format in which things operate here.
Anything else on that question?
Yeah, it's just that I'm going to take Martin up on his very kind offer. I've been doing zero-based budgeting in my role prior to my retirement for the past 15 years. And I know it's a complex process, a very necessary process. But as I said, all I've seen is incremental budgeting. And I'd love it, Martin, if you would take the time to walk me through that.
And I'll be very candid. Don't take my word for it alone. Take our treasurers, Rick Darling's, take Sam Nestor's, take Stefan Grozinger's word, take Steve Ezzy's the head of finance. It's just what it's done.
Okay.
All right, next question. And the first to respond is Mr. Moabier. And the question is, Weston has an exceptionally large amount of open space, including large natural preserves. What it does not have much of is town-owned land, especially near its center, for potential municipal uses such as alternative or affordable housing, active recreation, a community center, etc. Do you see this as a concern for the future? And if so, how would you address it?
First of all, one of the reasons I came here, not unlike many of our residents, the good schools, but for the open space, right? The environment is one of the most important things to me. The reality is that we do not have much municipally owned. That's just what it is. Short of the town buying and investing in properties, we will continue to kind of be in that scenario. So basically, then we have to work with what we have. As it pertains to the town center, that is owned by a private entity. And what we have been doing, and specifically Sam Nestor, has been engaging with that owner, the Robinson's families, to talk about ways in which we can, in fact, develop that space in that town center. At the end of the day, and this translates into not just that, but everything we do, private and public partnership gets things done. And it requires a collaboration. It requires sitting down with what we have and what we don't have and figuring out how we can make this happen. The town center will probably be a great way of indicating that we can kind of go to a private, individually owned entity and make the case, and our P&Z board has been doing just that together we can incentivize you to come along with the vision of the town. And in this case, it's being able to kind of provide a diversity of housing options that will serve our seniors who want to age in place, or young adults who are moving back here and cost of living is too high, or town employees, police officers who may not be able to live in here. So we are constrained because we don't own it. And bluntly speaking, on the surface, it may seem like we don't have leverage, but conversations make that happen, and being clever about how to incentivize our owners in town will get this done. And we're very optimistic. It's part of what we hope we can achieve in the long term.
Ms. Jenner?
Yes, if I understand the question correctly, it's about open space and not having a large amount of town open space in which we can have
In
commercial
the
development.
center of town, yeah.
Center of town for commercial development. First, like Martin said, I actually don't have any children, so I didn't move here for the schools. Although I believe in the school system because that's the future of our country. Open space is why I moved here as well. I don't think the town is in the best position to be the stewards of open space in a general way. I think places like the Aspetuck Land Trusts that's their job in order to preserve open space and protect our natural resources. But there does come a time when we want to do commercial development that it's probably wise to have some publicly owned commercial space. And I believe the long-term plan, the 10-year plan from the planning plan of conservation and development does take into account having commercial development along Northfield Road. As a matter of fact, I believe that's the reason that the sidewalk project has been initiated. And I think it's important. I honestly believe it's important. I think what's happened in Town Center, I respect the fact that Sam may be having conversations with the Robinsons, but we continue to have what looks like a giant going out of business sign in the center of our town. We just opened a pharmacy, a liquor store, and then the lunchbox and its outside seating. But that's all that the town has to offer in terms of amenities. So I think time has come to make sure that we have some public commercial space. That said, in balance, I think we need to be thoughtful about how we do it. Because if you look at downtown Westport, downtown Norwalk, you see miles of empty buildings, people who can't afford the rent and can't make ends meet. And that's largely driven by the commerce that we're all experiencing through the digital world. We have to make a concerted effort if we're going to have commercial space in this town, or we're just going to continue to allow the Robinsons to have all the commercial presence in the town. Either way, the people who own those stores and those buildings, they're people who are part of our community, part of the fabric of Weston. We need to support our local businesses. Otherwise, all the commercial space in the world isn't going to matter. We'll just have a bunch of empty stores. So I guess that was kind of a long-winded answer. I believe in open space. I see the town making progress in that regard, and I'm all for it.
Anything to add, Mr. Mohammed?
Now, I think our P&Z has a lot of active and institutional knowledge as to what is happening in Weston, and I think that they're actually currently crafting the vision that will actually lead to our town center actually being kind of, appealing to the eyeballs. Because I do agree with Amy, there's so much more that can be done with that asset. And quite frankly, I've read the surveys, our town residents are asking for that. We want to see amenities down there. We want to be able to see pedestrians, areas such that we can kind of walk, and there can be much more of an organic way of connecting and fellowshipping with each other. So I think that's been in the plans, but I have all the faith in their P&Z board, which is bipartisan, to kind of craft the vision to make this happen. But I will say this though, and this is me having a strong fiscal sense in us, using the money that we have very wisely. I do not believe our town should ever be in the business of owning property. We are not realtors. There are those who are much better at that. What we can do though is enhance and have the incentives to ensure that the developers that come into town are doing it according to our code and doing it in the fashion and with the aesthetics that brought a lot of us here into our kind of New England looking towns.
Anything else on that question?
Not for me.
Okay. Ms. Jenner, you're the first to answer the next question. Because of the pollution and noise generated by, excuse me, well, there's a mistake here in the way this is written out. The basic question is, because of the pollution and noise of leaf blowers and all of that sort of thing, Westport, for example, is considering an ordinance that restricts the use of gas-powered blowers to 2 6-week periods while allowing electric and battery operated. Would you favor or similar or even more restrictive regulations in Weston on this general issue of the noise and the pollution?
I have to say, Kay, in all the preparation that I did for this debate, and I did a lot, I didn't do any studying up on leaf blowers. So you're going to get this from the hip, right?
That's fine.
Gas powered, we all watching the world move more towards electric. Not that electric is completely based on natural origins. I mean, it still works on coal and gas for the most part, but we're moving away from gas because of pollutants and things like that. I'd need to understand it better, right? Because it's easy to say, let's get rid of gas powered leaf blowers. But there are landscaping companies, I'm back to this issue now again about locally owned businesses. We have a lot of landscapers here whose lives depend on being able to do a lot of different properties. And using an electric leaf blower to do that is probably not practical. So while at face value, that sounds like it's a really great idea, I think we need to do a lot more digging to really understand before you make any kind of ordinance around such a thing. Martin, I'd love to hear your point of view on this.
Didn't mean to interrupt you, sorry.
Oh,
Mr.
no,
Moorbeer?
I'll give both you and Amy my thoughts on this. It's quick aside. When I was younger, I took one of those kind of personality tests that were determined to tell you what's the best job that's suited for you. I was told that I should be a psychologist and a counselor. I bring that up because, and of course I chose finance. I bring that up because in my short time here as your selectman, I have been meeting and talking to a slew of folks. And what I realize that's actually important to me is that I like problem solving and I like being an advocate for our residents' problems. And I like doing it kind of on a one-on-one basis, quite frankly. I've actually had an outreach from one of our citizens, a senior woman who complained about the noise and wanted to see what could be done. Reached out to Chief Hennion, our police chief here, to see if he had some thoughts on it. The reality is that Weston does not have a noise ordinance, and it's something that we will be giving thought to. There might be some benefit to having it, especially when it's not just our landscapers, it's people sending out firecrackers, it's folks shooting out their guns in some cases, and so. But the reality is that we've got an active police force and police chief here who can be utilized to look into issues in which noise is a problem. And I encourage our citizens to actually leverage Chief Hennion and his force when it comes to issues like this. Sustainability is extremely important, and the reality is that I would love to ultimately see us move towards kind of, things that involve solar power and less gas and more electric. I mean, I think that's where the world is moving into. And so we probably need to look into doing just that. I mean, I think we can come up with solutions. I mean, we were all on a board of selectmen call just the other day where we're talking with Eversource, the big, utility company, and we have gotten them to actually consider revisiting some of the ways in which they spray for pesticides. The reality is that we as a community can say, no, let's come up and think differently about how we do things that were traditionally done, but potentially harms us. In the case of Eversource, they're spraying pesticides, Roundup in essence, that trickles into our water sources. And so, just a few handful of people can actually, make Goliath actually change its ways. And so again, in a similar way, I think we should give thoughts to how we utilize our gas-powered machinery.
Anything else on that topic?
Yeah, just one more comment, Martin. I would agree with everything you said, as long as as long as it's a collective we, right? So one of the problems is that the current administration will sit down with each other and make these decisions, and ordinances come out, or in the case of the mask mandate came out, even though there was a Board of Selectmen meeting the night before. We need to listen to everybody. We need to have bipartisan input into the issue. I'm going to emphasize again that I'm concerned about small businesses, and when we put ordinances in places that we make it impossible for them to survive. Green is good. There's absolutely no question about it. I'm all about green energy, but it's a transition. It's not a switch on and off. And we need to listen to what everybody has to say and then collectively come to a decision that's best for the town, all the way around.
Look, I mean, you're not going to get any objections from me when it comes to the importance of protecting our small businesses. And I can quickly tell you how the mask and the small businesses, overlap. And that is, when Sam, Selectman Nestor, was following the advice of our health department and to kind of and looking at the comps around us to put in masks, she went to the small businesses and she tested them and she ensured that what's going to happen would have minimal impact on them, and how, if it didn't, how we could work around this. So I hear you. Small businesses matter. As it pertains to the mask, safety matters more. We've got to be alive in order to go to the stores to spend our money.
All right, the next question, and Mr. Moorbeer, you're the first to respond. Weston has permitted accessory apartments since the late 60s, but only within the property owner's main residence, not as a separate structure. What is your position on the state mandate to permit an accessory apartment in a separate structure on a residential lot?
On my property lives a barn. A barn that's not occupied. It sits there, old, decrepit, you know. How nice would it be to be able to utilize that barn to provide some affordable housing options? Again, and I stated this earlier, that can help our seniors who want to age in place, can help our youth who want to come back, can help, you know, or in-laws, mother-in-laws, who would love to kind of be closer to their grandchildren. The reality is that currently, and again, I'm going to keep going back to our P&Z who are looking at this. You know, the state punted the decision. We do not have to do anything with it right now. But man, how powerful it is if we decide, Weston decides how we're going to utilize the ADUs. And I think ultimately, you know, we as a town are going to have to kind of make that decision. But it's an asset. It's an asset that can kind of, again, provide diversity of housing that I think it's so needed. And before we're told how we're going to do this, let's come up with your ideas ourselves. You know, let's consider maybe looking at ADUs that are no more than 1,000 square feet, such that it's, you know, in essence, it is kind of a minimal kind of impact on our 2 acres. But yet again, it provides a benefit.
Ms. Jenner?
Yeah, I want to agree with Martin on this, and I actually step away from a large percent of the population of Republicans who don't necessarily agree with having accessory units. I do think it solves an affordable housing problem by permitting that. I want to speak specifically about the accessory dwelling units that are on people's property. One of the reasons that I feel so strongly about opting into that is that for the most, I am aware that there are places where people are renting those out anyway, even though that's not permitted by town. So it's kind of under the radar, so to speak. And one of the issues is that the tenant's not protected and the owner's not protected. And that concerns me. And there's also a revenue issue that's associated with it, right? So the town could recognize some increased revenue from taxes and such if we were to legalize such a measure. So I think it's good for everything. I wouldn't rent out an old decrepit barn. But I do have a barn on my property too, Martin, and I feel kind of strongly about that if I were able to, I have a 90-year-old mother who lives with me currently. For the longest time, she wanted to live out in the barn so that she could have her independence, but still be close to family. I think it would be a wonderful option for people if we were to permit such a thing.
Any other comment? Mr.
Amy, you get a
Mulder?
thumbs up from me. I am touched that we agree on that issue, because I think
Yes, we do agree on that issue.
It's good for the homeowners and then collectively for the town. So,
Right.
you know.
We do agree on that issue.
All right.
And hey, taking care of our elders is something that is, it's in my DNA.
It's an inevitable, Martin. I think, but our generation, no, I can't include you in my generation, but
Don't be too sure.
our 2 generations are going to have to take care of children and our elders. And I would like a way to do that, to allow our elders to live in dignity, with dignity. Not in dignity.
And to continue to be active players in our community. They have laid the road for where we are now. And,
You bet.
you know, it's time that we kind of also kind of reciprocate the love
Mhm.
and the fiscal responsibility.
All right, Ms. Jenner, you're first to answer the next question. The language in Weston's current town charter makes it impossible even to discuss budget items at the annual town budget meeting if a quorum is not present. Do
Mhm.
you think the town charter needs to be revised?
Actually, so it's part of the town charter, but it's also part of parliamentary law that is part of New England's DNA, right? Having a quorum is critically important. I don't know if I go so far as to say that we need to change the charter. I think maybe what we need to do is change the mentality of the people who are looking at the budgets. We have a lot of people who are quick to criticize the budgets, including myself, but I make myself available to all of the meetings to best understand those sorts of things. So yes, I think we do need to have a quorum. in order to pass a budget. I think it's critically important that there's the right amount of input and that the decision's not left to a handful of people.
Mr. Moabir?
I mean, I guess historically, the reason why, you had it's a very New England way of operating. The reason why you had this kind of a structure put in there is because you never wanted 2 or 3 people showing up to, to the town meeting and being able to kind of influence the budget. However, the reality is that, we've seen is that not enough people show up to even allow us to have the discussions. And so, this probably strikes a chord as to why I'm running. And quite frankly, it's about engagement. It's about letting people know that, in our little small town, a voice matters and a vote matters. And, you've got to show up. You've got to kind of find ways to get involved. And the reality is, I'd like to hopefully make the case and the model that, you can be a parent, you can kind of, you've got to kind of figure out a way to kind of earn a living as well. And you can still kind of, get involved. We are lucky that our administration has taken a lot of proactive steps to communicate and to get the issues out there. Look, parents and adults are all alike. We've got busy lifestyles, and it's hard to kind of have your finger on the pulse as to what's going on. And I think communication is something that we're going to do to make that happen. But I would love to see more engagement happen such that more people turn up for those meetings and we can kind of, vote on the issues collectively. A voice and a vote is what's critical.
Anything else on that question? All right, Mr. Moabir, you're first to respond to the next one. What do you believe is the most critical challenge facing Weston today?
Look, in the here and now, public safety has to be first and foremost. We sadly enough are at a situation where, within even the school system, for example, half of its clients, if you will, are unvaccinated, and so don't have the opportunity to get a vaccine, and so they are vulnerable. But kind of telescoping forward, and realizing and hoping that COVID will at some point be a thing of the past, and look, masks will be gotten rid of. It comes back to what I said earlier there. Engagement and getting our community together. I'm speaking to a lot of folks who have lived in town for a while and seniors, and they all say collectively kind of the same thing, that the spirit of our town is, this is not the reason why they came here, and this is not what used to exist, and this is not how they enjoy it now. I would like to see that, in some regards, I feel as though civility has left the building, and I'd like to reintroduce it. And I'd like to find ways for us to organically come together and fellowship. We live in a small town, and so, we're 1 or 2 degrees separated from each other. And I think that kind of our quality of life would be enhanced tremendously if that kind of communal way of being comes back into place. The idea of having a town green where we can organically meet, hits that point. We're working and having workshops that will, again, organically bring people together to discuss and to meet and things of the sort.
Ms. Jenna?
Yeah, actually, I don't think that. Here's where we separate, Martin. I think public safety is really important. I think engagement is really important, but I don't think they're the most critical issues facing Weston today. I also don't think there's a single one. I think the first one is about local zoning and region and local control of the schools. This legislation comes up far too often, and even though it's quiet right now, it's going to come again next year. And there's legislation already floating around about taking control of local zoning. And we don't need a Hartford cookie cutter approach. We have very capable elected officials in planning and zoning. We're going to go through an election cycle again. And those are the people who are the stewards of our land. And zoning is a promise. When you move into this community, you're promised 2-acre zoning. So we need to be cautious about how much we let Hartford infringe on our freedoms. And the second one, of course, is about the regionalization of schools. We have a really wonderful program in open choice, and that gives people the option to opt in. And what better system is there for increasing diversity in our school system than something like that? So we need to be careful, again, that Hartford doesn't dictate how we run our schools. The second one I want to go back to is budget and taxes. And Martin, I actually have a very strong business background. I've been in business for the last 30 years, although I wouldn't say finance is in my DNA, but accounting sure is, and budgeting sure is. And I'd like to walk through the budget to see, let's agree to disagree on whether it's zero-based budgeting as it in the perfect sense, but to really understand where the money is actually going, because we don't get to see that as a town citizen. There is a 258-page report, but it's not really very telling. But Weston simply can't sustain year-over-year budget increases. Last year, it was a budget increase of 2.73%. Now, in Sam, with her comments, she said that only translated to an increase in mill rate of 0.55%. Well, only is relative, right? We were 5 minutes ago talking about affordable housing. We need to make sure that the people who are paying the bulk of the taxes in this town can also afford to do that, right? I believe in good schools. I believe in open space. I believe in a great community. But the property taxes, we have one of the highest mill rates in the state of Connecticut, and we need to hold on to that budget issue very, very closely. So those are the two issues I think that are the most important facing Westonites, is local controls of zoning and our schools, and budgeting the taxes.
Okay, and I'm afraid that's going to have to be the final word, because the time has come for closing statements.
I feel cheated here, Kay. I mean, look, keeping zoning local, you'll never get an issue from me on that. I totally agree with that. But I will disagree with you. If someone tells me 1 + 1 = 3, I will forever tell them no, it equals 2. We do zero-based budgeting here in Weston.
All right. Well, the timers need to shift. As I say, you candidates will see when they'll put up when you have 1 minute remaining, 30 seconds remaining, and then stop. So assuming that the timers are ready, and Mr. Morbier, you are the first, so your 2-minute closing statement.
So look, I am no politician. I'm a father who's surviving on 3 hours of sleep because both of his daughters are sick. But I am, and they'll be fine. But I am a concerned citizen who listens, has demonstrated a pattern of getting involved, and was called to action, and I responded. Again, I'm no politician, so I'm forced to kind of read my script here to some degree. Look, I come here with fresh thoughts and a new voice with different lived experiences than selectmen before me. I'm empowered because I truly believe our town is demanding something a bit different. I'm fortunate to have received a head start in learning what the job entails, but I am humbled. I am humbled for the welcome that this town has shown me and it's given me as I've stepped into this role. I've got 2 daughters, you've heard me mention them, 2 sick daughters, who will be going through the system for years to come. And I want to make sure that our kids grow up in the best version of what Weston can possibly be. And what does that version look like? More inclusive. We have a diverse cultures, including residents that are green card holders here. We have more residents of color moving in here, more multi-generational households. We're demanding to be a model of sustainability and taking the lead in protecting our environment and embracing innovation to accomplish that. We're courageous and we're going to take forward action on issues such as domestic violence, disability rights, racial inclusion, anti-Semitism, homophobia, to name the few. I'm a numbers guy, you know, with a focus on fiscal health, but I'm equally fueled by connecting and collaborating. You know, I intend to be the selectman who works with the left, the right, and the middle, listening to all sides, and will reintroduce civility back into our civil discourse. I'm going to continue to ask the seemingly dumb questions, the annoying questions, to not accept circular answers, to ask questions again, and to provide accountability and transparency of myself and my fellow colleagues. I will continue to work hard, listen diligently, and act in the best self-interest. We're at an inflection point. There's a lot of initiatives that are going to be passed in here that'll have long-term lasting impact. Our state rep is fond of saying, you know, your vote's your superpower. I'm humbled to ask for your support on November 2nd and to vote for Sam Nestor and Martin Morbier to continue to work as your selectmen to, as we say, to take action and get results. Look,
thank you. Your
at this
time
moment in
is
time,
up.
I truly believe that Sam and myself are well positioned to guide Weston through this exciting time.
Thank you very much. Ms. Jenner, your 2-minute closing statement.
Yes, the voters of Weston have an important decision to make on November 2nd. Are you comfortable with the status quo, or are you ready to make a change? Kirby and I share a common vision for Weston, a Weston that has an exceptional quality of life, a Weston that protects our rich history, our natural resources, and our small town spirit and values while building a sustainable foundation for the future. A Weston that provides unsurpassed value to its taxpayers, and importantly, a Weston that we're proud to leave to our children and our children's children. But to do that, we need to make important changes, and we need to do them now. First, as I mentioned, we need to make sure that we keep planning and zoning local. We're dangerously close to having Hartford apply their cookie cutter approach to Weston without respecting the fragile ecosystem on which it's built. We need a selectman that will stand up for local zoning, and we need that now. Second, we need to have our educational system local. Weston has one of the finest school systems in the state, and let's make sure Hartford doesn't erode that. And third, Weston, like I said, simply cannot sustain year-over-year tax increases. As it is, we have one of the highest mill rates in the entire state. And we propose a more transparent and fiscally responsible approach to budgeting. Now, this was a deliberate choice to run. It was part of my life plan. I am a retired from a Fortune 100 company. I spent 24 of my 30 years in executive leadership, and it wasn't easy. I wasn't successful by accident. I know how to get things done. I know how to get things done on time and on budget. And I'm skilled at strategy, marketing, and operations. But what's important to all of you to know about me is that I have enough experience to know that I don't have all of the right answers. Diversity of thought and opinion is key to coming up with solutions. Bipartisan governance is a must in a municipal setting. But you need a leader that's going to make tough decisions and stand up and take accountability for those decisions. And I promise you, you have that in Amy Jenner.
Thank you very much. And thank you, both of you candidates and our prior candidates. We appreciate so much your willingness to serve in public office. That's terribly important. And I also want to extend my thanks to the timers today and to all those in the Weston League of Women Voters who worked so hard to put this together. And it's wonderful to have had it work
Yes.
technologically on Zoom. So the last word is everybody remember to vote on November 2nd. Thank you both.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kate. Thanks, League of Women Voters. Have a great weekend.
Thank you very much, Cole and Kay.